found the dead end behind the post office.
Okay.
But I don't know who they are. Could have been a lot worse because they have a 2-year-old.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Okay, I'd like to call to order the March meeting of the Pennsylvania Board of Education. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Dalton?
Here.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Here.
Mr. Hardesty?
Here.
Mr. Packer?
Here.
Mr. Polenick?
Here.
Mrs. Tate?
Here.
Mr. Rainey is excused. Mrs. Smiley?
Here.
Mrs. Williams?
Here.
I am present. Mr. Johnston?
Here.
Mrs. Dolges?
Here.
Mrs. Eglin is excused. Mr. Grimaldi?
Here.
Mr. Dalton?
Here.
Mr. Gramling?
Here.
Mrs. Dalby?
Here.
Mrs. Sleppy?
Here.
Mr. Saffron?
Here.
Okay, are there any presentations this evening?
Not this evening, back.
All right, in a way of approving the agenda, we do have an amendment for 14E. I think all of you have a handout, but the new wording for 14E will be, we're looking for a motion to authorize Penns Manor Area School District to participate in the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Natural Gas Consortium and to authorize the district's business manager, Jennifer Sleppy, to negotiate a contract with Direct Energy Business Marketing, LLC, doing business as Direct Energy Business, for a term of 1 to 3 years to commence on September 1, 2022, either at a fixed price or NYMEX plus for the purpose of obtaining the best price for natural gas. Further, the Board of School Directors hereby designates the business manager as its responsible contact for the purpose of initiating the trigger orders. As such, term is defined in the contract. The board further authorizes the appropriate officers of the board to sign the contract on behalf of the district once finalized. So can we have a motion to amend the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, and with that change, then I need a motion to approve the amended agenda.
As amended.
I'll do that. I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, at this time, the board will hear citizens' remarks, if there are any. Okay, the minutes are included in your packet. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the business report. Can we have a motion to approve the financial report as printed?
I'll make the motion. I'll second it.
Questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Presentation of bills. The general fund has bills totaling $124,902.11. That's for 2021-22. And I guess that's it. So can we have a motion to authorize payment of the bills as presented?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Packer,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Okay, are there any program updates?
There are none this evening.
Okay, and that brings us to our report, superintendent report, Mr. John.
Sure. Before I begin, I just want to remind everyone that the Aaron IU convention will be held Thursday, April 28th. It's going to be Freeport School District, so any board member, please make sure that Nicole or I know before Friday if you wish to attend, so that we can so she can submit the following Monday our account. Also want to review for you items that are coming up on the agenda, just to remind you what you're asked to approve. First, and under curriculum committee, we're asking you to approve our 22 list of graduates, which are 59 individuals, based on the fact that they will complete all of the requirements. Also asking you to approve a revised school calendar, making March 18th a day for us to be in session due to a snow call-off day. Also asking you to approve our participation in the Aaron IU Pregnant and Parenting Teens program. Cost to the district will be $900. Under Budget and Finance this evening, asking you to approve some renewals for us, one of which is the Frontline renewal. That's our online attendance at a cost of $5,135.34. Also asking for you to approve the renewal for Turnitin. That's a 3-year renewal agreement costing $5,161.80. Also asking you to approve Pearson's work sampling license renewal. That's a pre-K assessment at a total of $761.25. Also asking you to approve the motion that Mr. Packer just spoke about at the beginning of the meeting. Also asking under Budget and Finance to approve 2 requests from Mrs. Lauer and Mrs. Rogers for lump sum payments at the end of the current school year. Also under Buildings and Grounds this evening, asking you to approve and award the bid of $5 per ton, which the bid was submitted by Mr. Aldemus of Pikes Peak Nurseries. And also asking you to approve an agreement to repair our high school gym bleachers at a cost of $5,880. Also this evening under Athletics, we do have one volunteer for you to approve for the spring, Larkin Crow for softball. Also asking you to approve the hiring of a track and field assistant coach 2, Mrs. Hardesty. Also under new business, before new business, under policies, we're asking you to approve the revisions that we had talked about in our administrative regulation with student activities. The changing of the language will now be that an individual that has insufficient funds to a check that they've submitted to student activities will be a fee of $8 plus bank fees. Under new business, asking you to approve the request for the majorettes to travel to Wildwood, New Jersey. Also, we have one guest teacher for you to approve. We also have asking your approval for an outside student placement, and then also asking you to approve the Act 93 agreement. And that's all I have this evening, Mr. Packer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any other reports this evening?
There are none.
Any old business? Okay, negotiation committee, Mrs. Eckenrode.
I have nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. William, curriculum?
Yes, I have 3 things for Mr. Packer. Number 1, approve 2022 list of graduates. I'd like to make a motion to approve the list of graduates for the class of 2022 as presented, pending completion of all Penns Manor area school districts requirements.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Packer,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
The next item, revised school calendar. I'd like to make a motion to revise the 2021-2022 school calendar to reflect January 18th, 2022 as a snow day number 1. School will now be in session on March 18th, 2022.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
The last item, approved participation in the RNIU 28 Pregnant and Parenting Teens Program. I'd like to make a motion to approve the district's participation in the Pregnant and Parenting Teens Program provided by Aaron Intermediate Unit 28 for the 2021-2022 school year as presented. The cost to the district is $900, and this is the same cost as last year.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Packer.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Williams. Budget and Finance, Mrs. Tate.
Okay, I have a number of things this evening. First one, 14A, approved frontline renewal for 22-23. I'd like to make the motion to approve an agreement with Frontline Education to provide an absence and substitute management program for 1-year term commencing July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023 at the cost of $5,135.34 as attached.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
Okay, next one, 14B, approved budgetary transfers for the 2021-22 fiscal year. I'd like to make the motion to approve and authorize the business manager to make the necessary budgetary transfers for the 2021-2022 fiscal year.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Next, 14C, approved Turnitin renewal. I would like to make the motion to approve a 3-year access renewal of Turnitin for the Penns Manor Area Junior Senior High School as presented at a total cost of $5,161.80.
Second it.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
Next, 14D, approve Pearson work sampling license renewal. I would like to make the motion to approve a 1-year renewal of work sampling online license for the pre-K counts assessments through Pearson for the 2022-23 school year at the cost of $761.25 as attached. This will be paid using pre-K counts grant funds.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
Next, 14E, seek pricing for natural gas. I'd like to make the motion to authorize Penns Manor Area School District to participate in the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Natural Gas Consortium and to authorize the district's business manager, Jennifer Sleppy, to negotiate a contract with Direct Energy Business Marketing, LLC, DBA District Energy Business, for a term of 1 to 3 years to commence on September 1st, 2022, either at a fixed price or NIMX Plus, for the purpose of obtaining the best price for natural gas. Further, the Board of School Directors hereby designates the business manager as its responsible contact for the purpose of initiating the trigger orders, as such term is defined in the contract. The board further authorizes the appropriate officers of the board to sign the contract on behalf of the district once finalized.
Second?
Questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckendrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mr. Hardesty. Motion carries.
Next, 14F, approve request for lump sum payment at the end of current school year. I'd like to make the motion to grant the following employees their summer salary and a lump sum payment at the end of the school year if funds are available. Eric Lauer and Cindy Rogers.
Second.
Questions? Roll call.
Sure.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Motion carries.
Okay, and last, 14G. Budget and Finance Committee will meet on March 16th, 2022 at 6 PM in the district quarter. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Tate. Mr. Rainey is not with us. Mrs. Rainey, how about Mrs. Rainey?
Oh, you're right.
But Mr. Hardesty is
She's
gonna-
not here either.
Mr. Hardesty is going to...
Mrs. Smiley is a member of that committee. Would you want to
Would you like to do
impose
that?
on her?
Sure.
All right. Nothing like being put on the spot, huh?
No. Okay. Items 15A, award topsoil bid. I'd like to make a motion to award the bid submitted by Mr. Jeffrey Aldemus of Pikes Peak Nurseries for the purchase of approximately 400 tons of unscreened topsoil at the purchase price at $5 per ton.
We have a second to that?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
No.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Smiley, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
15B, approve agreement to repair high school gym bleachers. I'd like to make a motion to approve an agreement with CM Eichenlob Company to furnish and install Hussey Seating Company certified parts to the high school bleachers as presented at a total cost of $5,880.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Smiley, second by Mrs. Williams. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mrs. Smiley. Okay, Mrs. Dalton, Athletic Committee?
Yes, I have a couple. 16A, approve spring volunteer. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following sports volunteers for the 2021-2022 school year, pending the receipt of all current clearances, cardio, impact testing, and the other coaching education courses as required by PIAA. Softball, Larkin Crow.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
16B, hire girls track and field assistant coach 2. I'd like to make a motion to hire Janesta Hardesty as the track and field girls assistant coach 2, effective immediately at the rate listed in the collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 through July 31st, 2022. The annual salary of this position is $3,051.33.
I'll second.
Questions?
Mr. Saffron,
Yes.
that's my daughter-in-law. Do I need to abstain?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Abstain?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Packer.
Thank you, Mrs. Dalton. Mrs. Smiley, anything for transportation?
Nothing at this time, Mr. Packer.
Okay. And Mr. Polenick, anything for technology and special projects?
Nothing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Polenick. Policies, approve revisions to Administrative Regulation 618 AR-0. Can we have a motion to approve the revisions to Administrative Regulation 618 AR-0 Student Activity Fund as presented?
I'll make the motion. Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Williams, motion carries.
Okay, any correspondence?
There are none.
Okay, under new business, approve Majorette's trip to Wildwood, New Jersey. Can we have a motion to approve the Majorette trip to Wildwood, New Jersey from April 28, 2022 to April 29, 2022? This will be no cost to the district.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Okay, 21B, can approve a guest teacher. Can we have a motion to approve the following guest teachers pending receipt of all guest teacher certifications from the IU for the 2021-22 school year? Someone's going to have to help me with the last name. Kristen?
Frankowski. Frankowski.
Okay. We'll just let it go at that.
Okay.
Okay. Can we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mrs. Williams, motion carries.
Okay, 21C, can we have a motion to approve the enrollment of student 58305 into Adelphi located in Indiana, PA?
Make the motion. Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Okay, 21D, approve Act 93 agreement. Can we have a motion to approve a one-year Act 93 agreement from January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2022, which includes a 2% salary increase to Act 93 members?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
I abstain.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, Mr. Hardesty, motion, second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Motion carries.
Okay, in the way of student recognition under 21E, PMEA Student of the Month for March 2022 is Greta Rattay. And these are the winners of the 2022 5th and 6th grade spelling bee. First place, Luke Dolges, must take after his mother.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second place, Lily Clutter. Third place, Logan Hood. And fourth place, Carol Lee Kovalik. Did I say that right? Yeah, Kovalik. Okay, and the following students have been named to the 2022 Pennsylvania Football News All-Academic Team. The Gold Team, these are members of the team that completed the 2021 season with a GPA of 4.0 and up. Alexander Blenik, who was a freshman. You take after his father?
Yeah, even a little more.
A little more, okay. All right. Our congratulations to both of these kids. Okay. And the Silver Team, these are members of the team that had a GPA of 3.5 to 3.9. Adam Ultimus, who's a junior. Mark Bagby, a junior. Ashton Corvina, junior. Braden Depp, sophomore. Ethan Depp, sophomore. Ty Fennell, senior. Max Hill, junior. Alec Johnson, a senior. Peyton Costro, sophomore. Eamon Lieb, a freshman. Justin Marshall, junior. Braden Pytash, a sophomore. Nathan Raphael, a junior. Jacob Tate, a sophomore. And members of the bronze team, which would have a GPA of 3.0 to 3.4, is Brighton Gillen, a sophomore, and Carter Smith, who's also a sophomore. So our congratulations to all of these kids for their accomplishments. Also, the following Penns Manor students placed at the Southwest Regional Science Olympiad held at California University of Pennsylvania on March the 2nd. First place in ping pong parachute, Kennedy Baker and Belle Hayden. Fourth place in bridges, Sarah Steitler. Third place in trajectory catapult, Sarah Steitler. It's nice to be able to recognize so many kids. So again, our congratulations to all of these students. Okay, can we have a motion to adopt or approve the field trips and conferences presented?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mr. Hardesty. Motion carries.
Okay, the next committee meeting is April the 6th. That'll be at 7 o'clock. Business meeting, April the 13th, also at 7 o'clock. Is there any other business that needs brought before the board this evening?
Just wanted to point out that Mr. Safran has a birthday coming up on the 13th and Mr. Johnston on the 24th.
Happy birthday. A little bit, just a little bit. Okay. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Hardesty, for pointing that out. We'll make sure that they all get cake. We'll run it to your office. We'll put it in the mail. Okay, any other business this evening? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Can I have a motion to adjourn?